So with the release of MORDHAU being of such excitement that the servers have been crashing, well, not too badly, but they're having some issues with it because so many people that they did not expect have started playing this game. I've had some issues getting into it, but more or less it has been an incredible experience. But of course, MORDHAU and Chivalry always seem to be these games that are compared so much. Chivalry coming out back in the day in 2011, 2012, being that one game that really owned the medieval market back then. And now MORDHAU coming out, everyone seemed to be comparing them. When I was streaming yesterday, if you guys didn't see it, make sure you go and check out the archive of that stream. It's probably on the channel by now. But everyone kept asking, what is it like compared to Chivalry? So I thought, why not settle this once and for all? Even though it is still just my opinion. Why not pit Chivalry and MORDHAU together? Two incredible games of their time, doing something that, yes, is similar, but I do feel like there are a lot of differences. Now, both of these games I think are great games, but I'm going to be sharing my opinion on which one I think is better. But because they've been compared so much, whilst I feel like playing them, you actually get two very different experiences. I mean, it does feel like MORDHAU has taken what Chivalry did incredibly well, I might add, back in the day, but brought it to a modern audience, improving it in almost every aspect. Yes, I goddamn love this game. Now, I have been playing MORDHAU, I might add, since the early alpha, but it was very bare bones back then, and I have to say, it wasn't great. I played it for a bit, but there was not many people on the servers. There was only really like skirmish team deathmatch sort of modes and battle modes and things like that, deathmatch modes. There wasn't really anything that would keep you there, but of course it was an alpha, so I held out, but there was a good foundation there. Some really great combat that felt really nice. It felt more weighty than Chivalry's combat, yet more precise. It took a little bit more use to get to, but once you got it, you could be an absolute badass with things like chambering, blocking, going in for changing attacks from slicing to stabbing in one motion, sort of chaining up attacks where you attack and time your next attack perfectly that it automatically chains up the attack in order to get multiple strokes out one after another. The combat was there, but there was something that needed to sort of be added to create this into an incredible game. Now, the MORDHAU devs, if you don't know, were Chivalry veterans back in the day. Torn Banner Studios, who made Chivalry, went on to create the disaster that was Mirage Arcane Warfare, a game that was quite fun, but really just took Chivalry and reskinned it. And as I'll talk about a little bit, Chivalry reskinned doesn't hold up too well in 2017, 2018, and 2019, when Mirage was supposed to really have its heyday. Now, Chivalry was great in the day, but as I said, I don't think it would work in today's gaming climate. I mean, remember those days when medieval multiplayer epics were all the rage? Back in 2012 when Chivalry, War of the Roses, do you remember that goddamn game? And Mount and Blade were some of the biggest multiplayer games on Steam. And which one is still active today? The one with the most fleshed out multiplayer game modes and single player. This is Mount and Blade. Chivalry had some great features and it did what it did amazingly, but these days there isn't enough for people to keep coming back. I mean, there's still some hardcore Chivalry players that are still on the game, and I think I did a video almost a year ago now about whether Chivalry was still dead, and there were still a few people on the servers, but there really wasn't anything even remotely compared to what it was back in 2012, 2013 days. But I do feel like Chivalry has the same issue that, you know, YouTube Let's Plays have. You might think that's a weird comparison, but you could keep people entertained for hours back in the day. Some unedited or very little edited YouTube Let's Plays. But now Let's Play channels seem to be dying off. People's attention span just isn't there anymore. Things like my videos, where it's short form content, I found is the best for people because people are busy or they're just lazy, but it doesn't really matter. It's what people like, some shorter content with some concise subjects that consumes people for longer periods of time. And while Chivalry has a version of that, MORDHAU brings a fresh new alternative with it. Let's talk a little bit about customization though. Whilst MORDHAU is in its infancy at the moment, it already shows potential with much more in-depth than Chivalry's ever was in terms of customization. You can earn coins from battles to buy new armor, weapons, etc. So far, no sign of microtransactions in the game, but unfortunately I guess time will tell. I really think that the developers won't be going that way. Nothing they have done so far has hinted towards any sort of microtransactions, but of course you have to be skeptical when you see some sort of money system within the game for buying new things. Now, it doesn't seem that any of these are pay to win. For example, the more you play, the better stuff you get that makes you OP on the battlefield? It really comes down to skill, because as you'll go into battles, you can make your own custom guys, that you can make your own custom armor and things from what you earn through battles, but there's also the presets that you might expect, with big heavy guys and full armor to really light archer or rogue type guys. Now this means that it's completely balanced. Even people that are using custom kits, it's not like if you first start out you're just going to have nothing. You'll still have the option to those preset loaded kits which have really heavy armor if you want to go up to someone that has customized really heavy armor. So the balance is on point at the moment. And I know it's not the biggest factor when it comes to these games. It really comes down to mechanics and gameplay. But graphically, surprisingly, Chivalry hasn't aged too bad. Looking back at gameplay and even loading it up a few days ago myself just to see how far it'd come and how it's going these days, it hasn't aged too bad. I mean, it still looks fine, but unfortunately when put side to side with MORDHAU, there's no comparison. But that makes sense. MORDHAU is a 2019 game, Chivalry is a 2012 game, and the amount of technology that has advanced through that time is non-stop. I mean, the lighting, the textures, the sound design, even the decapitation and the amputation when you're killing people in MORDHAU is incredible looking. It really immerses you in the world, but you have to keep on your toes the whole time because of the combat system, as I described before. There's some awesome new physics that the MORDHAU engine has been able to accomplish. Things like when you throw daggers at people, if they can time it perfectly, which takes a lot of practice, they're able to block it. And this is even more so with arrows. I mean, it's extremely unlikely you're going to be able to do that. If you saw my MORDHAU video about a week ago, you can see a clip in there of someone blocking my arrows as I fire at them, which I must think takes ages of getting the timing perfectly, but it looked pretty epic. Talking about sort of throwing weapons, MORDHAU weapons have these secondary modes, which gives a whole new level of depth to each weapon and loadout that you use. Being able to have a Zweihander that can swing, cutting through multiple enemies at once, chopping off 3 people's heads at once is quite satisfying, but then being able to press R and using it half-sworded, being able to get more accurate, doing a bit less damage but more accurate, getting between chinks in the armor. Things like other swords, being able to use the MORDHAU grip, which yes, while you're using the blade is of course more effective against a weaker armored opponent, slicing bits off them, but using the MORDHAU grip, using that hilt to whack some more heavily armored, which it does more damage to, adds a whole new dynamic and a whole new gameplay style to just one of the weapons. And this is done with pretty much all the weapons. Smaller weapons even being able to throw, even things like morning stars and maces you're able to just throw at people, which is incredibly satisfying. And just the generic environmental weapons, things like hoes and scythes lying around, blacksmith's hammers that you can pick up and throw at people's heads and they'll get stuck in people's heads and you can rip them out as well. And in the live stream I did yesterday, someone came up me with a pan. Unfortunately I had a sword, so I was able to kill them. I picked that pan up and went bonking people on the head and finally threw it at a guy's face. It was so satisfying and enjoyable to play, and these small environmental features really make the game and have these really enjoyable moments. Now I have to say, Chivalry did larger scale battles a little better I think at the moment. I mean, the maps were incredible in that game, and the variation in the maps, having anything from some burned out no man's land type maps to these massive castles that you'd able to have different stages where you're defending the village outside, then they batter through and you had to defend inside the castle as well. Chivalry did that incredible. Now MORDHAU is a bit less so on this side. I mean, there's 3 days that it's been out, so I think a lot more maps will definitely come, and hopefully some bigger maps as well, but what they've got so far is a really enjoyable standpoint anyway. I mean, saying this, from what MORDHAU has done in its first few days of release is incredible. The fights are so intense and the balance is pretty much bang on. Yes, server issues are a bit of a problem in MORDHAU at the moment, but as I said, it's been out, what, 3 days so far. So what it's got and accomplished in these 3 days is still incredible, and these can easily be fixed. But as I said, the developers did not expect the massive scale and the flood of people upon release, so I guess it's a good thing that people are so hyped and enjoying this game at the moment. Hopefully they can fix those servers within the next few days to keep people there. But let's talk a little bit about horseback riding, and this is a lot of fun in MORDHAU. I would even say it's probably one of the best horseback riding combats in any other game. Yes, I'm including Mount & Blade in that. While Mount & Blade has a very more simplistic horseback riding style, MORDHAU is a lot harder, but it makes it so much more satisfying. Couch lancing takes any medieval game and shuts it down when it comes to satisfying yet difficult to master cavalry combat in MORDHAU. Now, Chivalry had more game modes. I will give it that. I mean, it had free-for-all, duel, team deathmatch, last team standing, king of the hill, capture the flag, team objective, all the ones that you might expect. Team objective really being the big one because that was the one with all the sieges and things like that. And at the moment, MORDHAU only has these 3 game modes. But as you might expect, Chivalry has all these game modes, but they're all the pretty generic game modes. And while I say MORDHAU only has 3 game modes, I mean 3 main game modes. It has Frontier, Battle Royale, and Horde. Now, with your generic ones like Skirmish, Duel Deathmatch, Team Deathmatch, etc., they're still in MORDHAU, but they're not quite as pushed forward as something unique and original like the others. And yes, I did just call Battle Royale unique and original. Saying this though, the Battle Royale doesn't seem to be the most popular mode by a mile. While it is great and has been implemented well with spawning across the map and having to scavenge for weapons, the maps are first and foremost made for Frontier, not Battle Royale, so as you might expect, it doesn't quite work as well as other like solely made Battle Royale games. The maps don't work incredibly well for that game mode, but it's fine. It's not MORDHAU's selling point. Frontier is when it gets incredible. 32 versus 32 battles, fighting with objectives, massive open battles. It's so immersive and intense, often with attackers and defenders, while the attackers having to fight and push forward into objectives, sometimes pushing battering rams or catapults into position while the defenders have to guard from the opponents. Having 1 cavalry per team, you might think that's not much for 32 versus 32, but that 1 cavalry, if used well, can change the tides of the battle. But if used poorly, you waste your chance. So it adds a really nice new difficult dynamic to how you do team play throughout the game. And of course, finally, there's Horde Mode, which is by far my favourite. And yes, it is similar to a Call of Duty Zombies mode, which we've seen before. Players work together in a sort of co-op mode to defend against hordes and hordes of ever stronger growing enemies, earning money through rounds to buy weapons, armor, repair tools, medic equipment, and so on. It's so much fun to play, and getting a group of mates together is the best experience when it comes to Horde Mode. And I mean, if you manage to make it to the end of the Horde Mode, which is highly unlikely as it's goddamn hard, you end up being able to fight giants. Which is, I guess, something fun that they just added in at the end. But don't expect to get anywhere near this level. I was doing a whole live stream on it, as I said. I've done a whole video on it, and I've done a whole, like, hour-and-a-half live stream on it. So there's plenty of footage of these Frontier and Horde modes on my channel if you guys want to go and check them out for yourselves. There's smaller things like weapons and armors affecting speed and agility in MORDHAU, and being able to balance and customize your character to that. Placing and repairing barricades, which is a lot of fun. Being able to just play the loot, yes, that is something you can do, and interact with environments, things like rope lifts, small touches like that really make MORDHAU so much fun to play. And I mean, I have more focused on MORDHAU on this because this is the newer game, but it also packs so much more content in it, and I think that's what's going to make it more successful in the long run than Chivalry was. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love both these games. They're both incredible games and do what they do perfectly for the genre, but I do realise Chivalry is very much a piece of its time, a piece of its day, and MORDHAU does everything that it did, but with so much more on top of that. Therefore, overall, I think creating a more advanced and enjoyable game. But what do you guys think? Have you played them both? Which one do you prefer? What can you sort of compare between them two? But at the end of the day, these two are very separate games. Whilst yes, they have similarities, I think they both have their own merits that they have each accomplished, so you can hold them to them as separate games. Comparing them is always fun in videos, and yes, some people really wanted to see this sort of thing, but at the end of the day, these are 2 different games made by 2 different people doing 2 fairly different things, so I think they can both be enjoyed side by side. But this day and age, I feel like MORDHAU is really the way to go if that's the sort of thing you're looking at. But thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Sorry if it's dragged on a little bit too long and there's been a lot of talking. I tend to do that when I get a little bit carried away about games I goddamn love. I think MORDHAU is on like a release sale at the moment, so this is probably the best time to get it if you want to get it. Chivalry is probably cheap as hell anyway because it's been out for so long, but I don't expect there to be a ton of people still playing that game if you want a really big multiplayer experience. But thank you so much for watching, guys. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Go and check out my Discord for playing some MORDHAU in groups, that Horde mode, getting some groups together. That's what I'm definitely going to be doing very, very soon. And maybe if clan battles become a thing in MORDHAU, that will be a lot of fun to get something set up. But thank you so much for watching, guys, and until then, I will see you in the next one.